Betty White will probably be an American icon for centuries to come. Her amazing talent, the incredible life she led, the way she stood up to bigotry and racism, all while making us laugh until we couldn't breathe, there will never be another like her. And in true Hollywood fashion, even she had her duds. As most of us know, her show in the 1950s was canceled after she insisted on having a black performer on the show. As if a puny bully like NBC was going to keep her down, she kept making new shows and building her name. She made guest appearances all over the place, and in 1977 she teamed up with John Hillerman, who was best known at the time as Howard Johnson in Blazing Saddles. Later, he'd become a household name as Higgins, the long-suffering major domo who had to deal with Magnum P.I. Together, he and Betty White created the sitcom that we see before us. The basic premise: Betty White is Joyce Whitman, an actress who's having a little trouble finding work as she gets older. She gets the lead role in a new cop show, and she's delighted until she learns that John Elliott is going to be directing the pilot. John happens to be her ex-husband, and they did not part amicably. And action. That's the theme song for the show Joyce and John will be working on. It's called Undercover Woman. It'll also serve as the theme song for the Betty White show. We are nothing if not recyclers. In fact, you probably noticed that we also recycled the Batman theme and turned it upside down. Talk about efficient.
Nancy, you home?
Hi, Joyce. Listen.
Nancy, guess what? I got the part.
Oh, Joyce, how wonderful. You got the part. Oh, what part?
Mitzi is Joyce's roommate. Audiences recognized Georgia Engel instantly. She had just come off a 5-season stretch as Georgette Baxter on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was her first really big acting job. She pretty well jumped straight from that show to this one and had a real knack for playing, pardon my terminology, but she excelled at playing ditzy blondes, such as this one.
But the best part is I'd have security. A weekly paycheck. I won't be dependent upon alimony checks from old Pickle Puss.
Oh, that's what I wanted to tell you.
What?
Old Pickle Puss is on the patio.
I don't have to explain who that is. And now we're going to see the whole show in a nutshell.
Come on inside, John.
Hello, Joyce.
Well, it's nice to see you again, John. How long has it been?
Exactly 26 alimony checks.
Same old John. I see you still have your mustache. Or did you have anchovies for lunch?
That's the show right there. Oh, there are secondary, marginally useful things like plots, but the crux of the show is these two taking pot shots at each other. It never lets up, and it gets old real quick. Some of the gags are good, I'll give them that, but there are just too many of them, and they come at you like waves of bad guys in a poorly done video game. There's no time to stop and breathe.
Well, John, nice meeting you. I'll go give Boots his lunch. Have you seen him anywhere?
Yes, he was lying on the front lawn cleaning himself.
You have a new boyfriend, Joyce?
Case in point.
Boots isn't anybody's boyfriend. He's been fixed.
And he's a lot friendlier since. Maybe you ought to try it.
Case in point continued. The personal wisecracks are relentless, and they're not always very original.
As I was saying, I'm here on business. I understand CBS has given you the lead in the Undercover Woman pilot.
Yes. Isn't that great? Just think, after so many years of battling to get somewhere in this business, at last, I know the thrill of victory.
They've asked me to direct it.
And the agony of defeat.
If you don't recognize the most famous line from the opening of ABC's Wide World of Sports, you're probably a 90s kid or later. The show folded in 1998 after more than 30 years on the air. The line, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, was already a cliche by 1977, and I think this was something like the 10,000th time someone had tried to make it into a joke. John is there to ask if they can work together like professionals for 2 weeks to make this pilot. He says they only want him for the pilot. If the network buys the show, he'll be off the project and out of her hair. They agree to put their differences aside and do their best to make a good show. So it's time to sit down for the cold read. Let's meet a few more people.
This is Fletcher Huff, who will play the police chief.
How do you do?
This is Hugo Muncie.
Oh, we work together, huh?
Hugo will dress like you and be your stunt double. And this is Lisa Vincent.
Oh, this is such a thrill working with you, Miss Whitman. I've admired you for years.
Well, thank you.
And years.
Very much.
Lisa is the requisite. Let's put it this way. Her trailer has a revolving door and so does her couch. She's the eye candy for the episode.
Just brilliant of you to cast her in this part. I mean, it would have been so easy to do what Charlie's Angels and Police Women and all those other hit shows did.
What's that, dear?
Oh, you know, hire someone gorgeous and voluptuous, sexy and young. I mean, finally, television has come up with a star that the middle-aged frumpy housewife can identify with.
Sorry, Lisa, but even at age 99, near the end of her life, if Betty White looked like a frumpy housewife, it was deliberate. But this is Lisa. We all know what she was really thinking.
Hire someone gorgeous and voluptuous, sexy and young.
You know, someone like me. Let's get on with the read, shall we?
Excuse me, John. Sorry, I'm late. My car broke down.
I guess we shall not get on with the read.
Well, that's okay. These things happen no matter who you are. Who are you?
I'm sorry. Doug Porterfield.
I'm glad we cleared that up. What's a Doug Porterfield?
The CBS has assigned me as the liaison to your show.
He's all excited because yesterday he was in the mailroom. They yanked him out of there, gave him a fancy title, and sent him over here.
So you see, this is a real thrill for me, being my first network assignment.
Oh, yes, the first time is always special.
What a memory you have.
The 2 weeks zoom by and the pilot is finished. And you knew this was going to happen.
Joyce, are you sure you only invited John over this evening to talk about problems in the show?
Certainly, dear. It's strictly business.
Yeah, monkey business.
She says she'd forgotten how charming John can be, and yes, she's thinking about trying to give it another shot. Mitzi says, if he's that good, why did you divorce him?
Oh, who can say why a marriage breaks down? I can. That man didn't have one iota of human warmth in him.
And there's the rest of the series, what there is of it, right there. She's going to try and force him to come out of his shell and show his emotions. He's still broken and she wants to try one more time to fix him.
Do you know, in 5 years of marriage, I never could get him to say I love you. The most romantic thing he ever said was, am I too heavy? Was when I carried him over the threshold.
Get your mind out of the gutter. John arrives all set to talk about the script. He doesn't seem to be noticing any of the trappings of seduction.
The police chief can't trace you because the homing device he's fastened underneath your car only has a radius.
Any of the trappings. She says, I didn't invite you here to talk about the script and you know it.
John, tonight we are going to talk to each other. The way we never talked in 5 years of marriage. We're going to talk about how we feel.
Why do people do this? The stereotype is women always trying to get their men to open up, but this is a thing that cuts both ways. Ask me sometime how I know that. And I don't care what kind of plumbing you have or what your gender identity is. Forcing this kind of thing doesn't work. You can't pry a person's heart open with a can opener. If they don't want to, if they're not conditioned to, if they've been taught not to, trying to make them be different, especially on the spot like this, just causes resentment and widens the rift between you. He describes himself as a cold fish, and she agrees. So throw him back and drop your line in the water again. She doesn't have these feelings for him. She feels the nostalgia of being in love. He doesn't. She can't seem to grasp that.
You're not leaving here until you open your heart to me. So you might as well take off your shoes and pour yourself a drink and make yourself comfortable. We may be spending the night together. What do you say to that?
Well, it's all right with me. I just don't know how my wife will feel about it.
By the way, that's a lie. He's not remarried. He said that to get out of the situation. That should tell her something, but she's not getting the message.
Now, I want to go over this very carefully, Joyce, because we don't have replacements for some of these breakaway props, and we have to get it right on the first take.
He probably shouldn't have told her that in the same breath that he admits he lied to her about being married. There's no telling how she's going to take that.
Now, let me get this straight. Which was the breakaway prop you did not have a replacement for? Was this the one?
Yes, that was the one, Joyce.
Oh, and I guess you also want me to be very careful not to break this right now, too.
All in all, I'd say she's taking it rather well. She hasn't hit him yet.
What about this chair?
No, you don't have to worry about that. We have other breakaway chairs.
I'm glad to hear that.
However, that wasn't one of them.
I stand corrected. And we can't have a scene of this type without this.
Well, fine. I think I have the feel of the scene. You let me know when you're ready for me.
It's all been done 100 times. Betty White and John Hillerman are acting their hearts out, but they have precious little to work with. Later, Joyce is having a cast and crew party at her house while they wait for Doug to bring news from the network. What's the verdict?
They said it was lurid, tasteless, cheap, ludicrous, far-fetched, and only suitable for someone with the mentality of an 8-year-old. They loved it! They only wish they had 20 more like it!
And since he's the co-star of the show, we can't dump John as director. Joyce will make a rash decision and ask him to stay with the show. He explains that he's not going to change, and she says, I can try to deal with that. At least she has an efficient and amicable stunt double.
You see, Hugo, you don't have to do that socially.
Oh, I know. I did it just to make you laugh. Besides, it's Ladies' Day at the car wash.
Hugo, I've got great news. They bought the pilot.
Hey, that's terrific. Congratulations.
Okay, I officially like Hugo. He won't get much screen time, but that was funny. This pilot wasn't all that good, and honestly, it didn't do either of our leading actors justice. So far, the comedy is all centered around their arguments, and in 28 minutes, it's already getting stale. Battling couples have been a staple of comedy for centuries, but you have to mix it up a little. Fletcher, the guy who plays the police chief, is about as insecure as it gets, and every time he finishes a line, he whines, "Did I do it right, John?" He was played by Barney Phillips. This man had tons of credits to his name, most often playing a policeman or some such. So he knew how to take a serious cop role and turn it into a joke. Show me more of that. Show me more of Mitzi being Mitzi. It's not as though Georgia Engel didn't know how to make us laugh. All she had to do was speak, and that voice got us chuckling instantly. And her character is one of the more interesting ones. Spread it around. I know we're establishing the basic premise, but it's possible to do that without beating people over the head with it. Many of the jokes are funny, but usually it's because of the actor's delivery, not because the line itself is hilarious. And that right there is my biggest gripe. We have two world-class leading actors here. Betty White had been a household name for ages, partly for her own work and partly for her marriage to Alan Ludden, late host of the original Password game show. Their marriage was as close to a fairy tale as it gets. As we know, when he died in 1981, she knew she'd never find another like him and didn't even bother to look. John Hillerman, by contrast, was still in the early stages of his career. He had only been on the scene for about 7 years, but with his roles in Blazing Saddles and Chinatown, he had already established himself as a force to be reckoned with. This was not an amateurish production, at least as far as the acting goes, but the writing and the pilot left much to be desired. I haven't finished watching the entire series yet, but what I have seen so far doesn't look much different. So we may not have to dig too deeply to discover why the series failed. Together, he and Betty White created the sitcom, good grief. Betty White was probably, good grief, series failed. I cannot believe I got that in one.